Over the weekend, I ran a video and a website post discussing, boom, whether or not your deleted diesel truck is legal now after the EPA's deregulation news. We talked about whether you can have an old truck and now go through emissions, be fine, or take a new truck and take the emissions off of it and go through emissions, be fine. Is that legal or not? Did federal law change? That was the big question. And I went through the video, explained my information, where I got it from, laid all my sources, and it was interesting. The comments were either like, "Hey, totally agree with you," or "Hey, you're a Democrat, a liberal, a rhino, a jerk, an idiot," all kinds of things, which I find fascinating. I don't even know where I'm at politically these days, so go ahead and call me whatever you want to call me. I just call myself a disgruntled American because I hate bad leadership, and we've had a ton of it in my adult life. But I want to go into this comments more about the video because there's two key pieces that popped up. Whether or not a 2009 endangerment law was going to be challenged and reversed. That's something that they are considering. And then talking about the Transportation Freedom Act, I think is the way them say it, and whether that act is going to get through Congress and really roll back emissions, making an impact for you guys as diesel truck owners and prospective shoppers. And that's why I do these videos. This isn't in a politics page. It's not a politics channel. But I think if you're out there thinking about changing over your fleet, if you're thinking about buying another run of trucks, if you're going to buy a new truck, I think this stuff really does matter because you need to know where we're at today and what it may look like in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now when you're out there shopping. Should you hold off now, wait for deleted diesel trucks? Should you do something else? I think it makes a big difference. So let's talk about this. So the first topic that came up, and a lot of the not a lot, but some of the comments were pretty savvy. And hey, thank you for you guys for commenting. There's some pretty savvy people out there, and it was really interesting to read your comments. But it came down to this. It's an endangerment and cause or contribute findings for greenhouse gases under Section 202A of the Clean Air Act. Now, this came about on December 7th, 2009. The EPA administrator signed two distinct findings regarding greenhouse gases under Section 202A Clean Air Act. The key one is the endangerment finding. This is something that the new EPA chief administrator, Lee Zeldin, was all like, yeah, we're going to look at this because it's funny because he's like, I've been told this is the holy grail of emissions laws. Well, you shouldn't be told that. You should know that if you're the administrator of EPA, but that's regardless. That's what he said. The administrator finds that the current and projected concentrations of six key well-mixed greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, doing my best with the science here, and sulfur hexafluoride in the atmosphere threaten the public health and welfare of current and future generations. One thing I want to point out is public health. This is a really key point. Now, I'm going to get in that in just a minute, but my question was, why did we get to this point? If you recall, and I recall, I grew up in that area, and I was actually in my 20s during that time period. Boy, I feel old. But the EPA was not regulating greenhouse gases at that time. They weren't. They were working on just smog with cattle converters. They were just working on things that they knew about. And now they have this change in 2009 to say, hey, we identify greenhouse gases and these six of them that can cause public health and welfare issues. Well, I went back in time a little bit. Well, I went back in time. So I went back in time for a little bit, and this was interesting. So it came from a decision in 2007 where the state of Massachusetts sued the EPA, and the state of Massachusetts, along with several other states that joined with them, won. And here's why this is important. The primary holding of this case was that the Clean Air Act allows the Environmental Protection Agency to regulate greenhouse gases because they qualify as air pollutants. Also, standing requires showing a concrete harm that can be traced to the defendant and remedied by the courts. So this is This is a very interesting case and something that we should all understand. So Massachusetts versus state versus EPA. So it says based on respected scientific opinion that a well-documented rise in global temperatures and attendant climate changes, environmental changes, have resulted from a significant increase in the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases. Okay, so a group of private organizations, as well as state of Massachusetts, sued the EPA because the EPA was not regulating greenhouse gases, which is the Clean Air Act and the clean air of the EPA is part of their statute on why they even exist. So Massachusetts went to court and said, you have got to enforce this. The Supreme Court agreed, and they agreed that the EPA shall, by regulation, prescribe standards applicable to emissions of any air pollutant from any class of new motor vehicles. We're also talking about planes, we're talking about trains, talking about ships, which EPA's administrative judgment causes or contributes to air pollution. So the Supreme Court said, get back to work, EPA. Now, what's interesting is they talk about what air pollutants are. The EPA argued, and this you'll hear this again, I think, is going to come in court. The EPA denied the petition from Massachusetts saying they have to do it, and they got overturned by the Supreme Court. They reasoned that the act does not authorize it to issue mandatory regulations to address global climate change. So the EPA administrator acknowledged that the global climate change is going on back in 2007, and it says the act does not authorize it to. The statute that the EPA was founded on. It also said even if it had the authority to set greenhouse gas emissions, it would be unwise to do so at a time because a causal link between greenhouse gases and increasing global air temperatures was not unequivocally established. Agency further characterized any EPA regulation of motor vehicle emissions as piecemeal approach to climate change that would conflict with the president's comprehensive approach involving additional support for technology and innovation. So the president, this guy, George Bush, wanted to make changes to the technology to address this issue. So that's what the EPA argued. The court said, nah, not buying it. They said you need to enforce these as part of your mandate as far as the statute. And so they said the case suffers from none of the facts, more legalized terms in here. But they talked about a couple things. Talk about first, the harms of climate change are serious and well recognized. And the harms in some degree are the climate change happening in Massachusetts. I'm a big fan of Deadliest Catch show up in Alaska. And even those captains talked about how their catches have gotten less, how the crabs are moving elsewhere because changes are happening. So it causes some fundamental economic changes. Now, whether you agree with climate change or not, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. You can call me whatever you want to call me, but this is what happened. This is what led to this Endangerment Act. Now, what's interesting with the Endangerment Act is talk about public health. And why did it talk about public health? Well, this is a key thing that people seem to miss a lot, is that the emissions regulations are twofold. First of all, talking about climate change is one piece of it. Okay. Argue, hate that, love it, not happening, great, whatever. Put that aside. The bigger piece that I've seen in different CAFE documents I've read, NHTSA documents and things, is they talk about public health in terms of air pollution causing cardiovascular issues. Lung cancer is a big one. So if you think about like places in the United States, like I've been to ports of Los Angeles, ports of LA, and you think about those communities around the ports, they are suffocated by pollutants coming from diesel engines that operate in those ports that go over the town, and people are sick. Lung cancer is a big issue. And so if you look at the last CAFE regulations that who was the president? Biden was president, they put out. They talk a whole section in there about how their emissions regulations will save the country money because they'll have less of the poor people getting sick with lung cancer and going to the hospital, not being able to pay their bills and filing bankruptcy. It's interesting because people don't always understand this, is every CAFE standard, the corporate average fuel economy, which is something the EPA has put out since 1970s, they have to justify in a broad term of economic benefit that their CAFE laws go into place. So what's really interesting about this idea of going back to this endangerment finding and reversing this is you have twofold thing. You have a Supreme Court precedent that says they have to mandate that by statute. You also have a lot more data now today than we did back in 2007 that concurrently keeps adding to the argument that says that greenhouse gases cause problems for society. And what's interesting is diesel exhaust fluid became a requirement right after the 2009 Act happened. So, and that's the other thing that people need to understand is, so 2007 law happens, 2008, 2009, EPA has focus groups. They bring in lots of people. They bring in anybody from conservatives to liberals and all these different groups. They had 380,000 public comments when they approved the 2009 Endangerment Act. That's how much information they get. That's why it takes a long time for things to change, because it's part of a process. You have to bring in stakeholders. You have to talk to those stakeholders. You have to have public meetings. You have several different public meetings throughout the country. It takes you months to get all this stuff together. So that's why change isn't immediate, because you have to go through the process. Very, very important. And so what's interesting is when you look at this stuff and you talk with legal scholars. So this is an interesting story on Time this morning. What legal experts say about Trump's sweeping EPA deregulation. There's a couple key points on this. We talked about the endangerment finding, which is a key thing. We're just in this video. So what's interesting is these experts are saying that it's an all-out assault climate regulation, environmental and public health protections. Public health protections. Again, lung cancer, big deal. The announcement does not mean that EPA has a legal authority to institute the proposed rollbacks. It's not within the authority of the agency to take action or to push through decisions that are directly and diametrically opposed to its mandate and the reason it was created. So Lee Zeldin can't just say, I'm rolling back emissions because it's costing us millions of dollars, people having broken down trucks, because that goes against the mandate and the reason why the EPA was created. So while every administration has flexibility in how they enforce agency regulations, the process of outright repealing regulations is more complicated. Merely making announcements from this high up does not change the law. It does change the statutes. It doesn't change the statutes that exist to protect clean air and clean water. So they can make regulations, but their EPA statute, why it exists, is to clean the air and clean the water and protect the health of people throughout the country. In order to roll back a rule of regulation, the EPA would have to go through a process defined as Administrative Procedure Act, which requires federal agencies to publish notices of proposed and final rules, provide plenty of opportunity for the public to comment on those proposed changes. So you go through this entire process, and you have to, one of the most signature and most important features of this process, agency has to be made clear what it intends and or purposes to do and why. So the EPA has got to go out there and say, we want to roll back these standards because it's costing American trucking companies lots of money in emissions equipment failures. But that's not their statute. That's not why the EPA exists. EPA exists, clean air, clean water, and protect public health. So they have to tell people in Congress, and they have to say, we're going against our mandate by recommending something that is against our statute. It's like, what are you guys thinking about here? So what's interesting is since the last 15 years, we have a lot more information about scientific evidence. And so undo the finding, the agency we have to show that the scientific, jump a little bit. So to undo the finding, the 2009 Reclamation Act or Endangerment Act, too many acts, to undo that finding, the agency would have to show that the scientific evidence is incorrect, disproving a globally accepted fact. Pollutants from greenhouse gases reduce air quality, which increases individual risk for cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. So they would have to go back and say the science is wrong. You don't get lung cancer from pollution or any other diseases, heart disease, whatever. They have to prove the previous determination that greenhouse gases cause climate change and endanger public health and welfare was wrong or was not based on sufficient scientific evidence. And there's no basis for that. The science is quite clear. So it's interesting that he can make these comments, people get all fired up, and you see them on YouTube, and we're getting rid of all these emissions. Yay, and it's great. And I'm not a huge fan of emissions equipment either. But let's understand the whole process here. This is a multi-year approach. And really what Zeldin needs to say is, I plan on demolishing the EPA. I want to go to Congress and ask them permission for the EPA to go away completely. Now, that's a whole different ball of wax. And that'd be the one thing they could do to change it all, would be to get rid of the EPA completely, which is, okay, do it. The other question that came up was Transportation Freedom Act. Okay. This was Senator Moreno from Ohio. Really interesting, this act. This is brought up, and this is an act. So let's understand this and why I didn't report on it. It is a bill. Do you remember Schoolhouse Rock and growing up? And maybe I'm dating myself, but how does a bill become a law, right? It goes into Congress and goes into a committee, gets talked about, goes on the floor, gets debated, and gets voted on by the House, and then the Senate approves it, and then goes to the president. So this doesn't exist yet, is what I'm trying to say. But this has got a lot of people excited because it's a Transportation Freedom Act, Freedom Act. And let's go through this line by line. So this is the draft of the act. And again, this will have to get changed quite a bit. It's a one-pager, and I'm sure it's got 400 pages of government speak. Which, by the way, if you ever read those articles, get a big cup of coffee. I've read them, all those documents. It's annoying. Anyways, it says despite decades of investment and innovation and an ongoing track record of cleaner and more efficient vehicles, automotive American manufacturing has been under attack. Really, Moreno? Really? I'm shocked he says that. I really am, and for a couple reasons. First of all, Bilstein is in Ohio. They've expanded greatly, and they've added a lot more robots because they can't have enough employees because their manufacturing keeps booming. They can't, and the workforce can't keep up. Just south of him, on Kentucky and Tennessee border, Ford invested $11.4 billion to create 11,000 jobs for the next EV. It's part of their Blue Oval City. That's Scout. Was it Scout Motors? Scout Motors is going to build a plant in South Carolina and build EVs there. Uh, Belvedere in Illinois is reopening to build the next generation of a Ram midsize truck. GM has invested millions in Fort Wayne. So all around him, companies have invested into automotive manufacturing. So I'm just like, really? That's your first comment? So inconsistent regulations. I'm not sure what he means by that. Foreign competition. So Scout and Bilstein and Blue Oval that are creating American jobs in the United States are bad. Honda, which has an R&D center in Ohio, keeps expanding, and he's got a problem with that. Misguided policies in Washington. Sure, there's always misguided policies. Are pushing a great industry into a downward spiral of plant closures and job losses. I had to double check on that one because here's the deal. I'll give you a little background story. Janesville, Wisconsin assembly plant. If you're still with me, 18 minutes in the video, or however it is, that's my recording says 18 minutes. Janesville, Wisconsin. I'm going to point this out to you guys because I was born there. I was born in Janesville, Wisconsin. My dad's was GM for 30 years. I'm actually a GM brat. I get called all sorts of different names, but that's what it was. And we went from Janesville to Fort Wayne up to Michigan to do a couple of plants up there. Janesville assembly plant did close. It did go away. Why? They built a plant in Indiana. They built a brand new plant in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that was more up to date, and they moved the employees from Janesville to Fort Wayne. I know. My family did the move. So did that plant close? And is that part what he's saying? Because it didn't really close. It just kind of moved. And I actually had to Google this. I thought, let's go to Wikipedia. There's a list of former automotive manufacturing plants. And I'm scrolling through, and there's some from Italy that closed. There's American Motors that closed in 1988. Just scrolling through the July 2007, Austin Martin closed, and the plant closed in England, Victoria. But a lot of these cases, the production either discontinued or moved. Good example: the Plymouth Ballant, Plymouth Barracuda, Dodge Dart, Dodge Challenger, Dodge Charger, and the Belvedere Cornet closed 1971. Okay, that was in Los Angeles. Well, Los Angeles, that property value has gotten pretty high, and those vehicles are all dead now. Chrysler Manufacturing closed in New York, Delaware. Aspen, Durango, K-Cars, Dodge Dart, that all stuff got moved to another plant. I think in a lot of cases, when you look through these plant closings, you'll find a consistent theme. These plants closed, the vehicles weren't being built anymore. And the other thing I would tell you is the reason why some of these plants closed is that American manufacturing over the past 30 years has become much more efficient. They build, was it 1,300 trucks every hour in Fort Wayne is what I Googled. I could be off on that. But my point is, they're more efficient at building vehicles. We can build trucks faster, so you don't need as many plants. The overall production of vehicles hasn't gone down. 16 million vehicles sold last year. It's on a pace to reach a record, and we're setting records in that. And we're also seeing all manufacturing jobs, job openings everywhere, and plants are adding robots because they can't find enough employees. So I'm still, again, I'd like to know some sources for his information because it doesn't seem like it makes sense. The Biden administration's heavy-handed emissions regulations, I agree with that, coupled with billions of taxpayer-funded electric vehicle subsidies, have thoroughly distorted the marketplace. Sure. We're spending billions in plant productions and adding more jobs and distorting the marketplace. Sure. EV sales didn't take off as much as people thought. That happens. It's business. While hurting American workers. American workers, let's be clear about something. American workers just got a hell of a raise for the UAW contract. I think they're doing just fine. I don't think there's any issues there. Consumers, it hurts consumers. I'm not seeing that. At 16 million units, consumers are buying vehicles. Now, is there an affordability issue in automotive? Absolutely, affordability issue. But we're still getting people are buying these vehicles, and it hurts automakers. Last time I checked, automakers are making billions in profit, even trillions. So I'm not sure I agree with that. Without action, the industry represents 5% of GDP and has helped the American middle class will be permanently weakened. The American workers just got a huge raise. The Transportation Freedom Act provides a bold, pro American, pro worker solution to revitalize American manufacturing and restore fairness and emission regulations. Okay. So he's saying, first of all, we're going to provide a 200% tax deduction for American auto workers and supports and encourage job creation in the United States. 200%. How are you going to pay for that? That's my question. Are we going to use more deficit spending? I'm not a fan of that. So 200%. Okay. It will ensure that the U.S. remains a global leader in vehicle innovation, design, and manufacture centered here at home. But we're not a global leader. Okay. We are part of the global leaders. We're part of a group of them, but we're not the global leader anymore. China. A lot of focus on China, world's largest automotive market. Lots of manufacturing happening overseas. The common sense emission standards repeals EPA's extreme tailpipe rule, which would mandate 67% of all new vehicles be electric by 2032. Yeah, that's a bad rule. It should be gone anyways. EPA is probably going to look at that. That'll be the one thing they're going to focus on, which is what Zeldin said he's going to focus on, was reconsideration of light duty and medium duty and heavy duty truck standards. So that rule goes away. We all agree that. Good rule. Gone. Eliminates burdensome emissions rules for heavy duty trucks for protecting supply chains or working class industries. Okay. Yep. We're always trying to have less regulation on transportation. Ends arbitrary cafe fuel economy standards that require manufacturers to build the vehicles that consumers simply don't want. Arbitrary, it's not arbitrary. It's gone through a long process, lots of stakeholders. It's very well vetted. Now, it says it requires manufacturers to build vehicles that consumers don't want. Really, what they got to do is just redo the 2027, 2032 standards, which we're talking about doing, and it'll make that change happen. EV mandate goes away. It's all done. You don't need to end cafe. It's not a big, that's not, I just think that it's interesting. Provides a 180-day window for cafe standards and greenhouse gas emissions to be replaced with tough but achievable standards reflecting market-ready technology and industry consultation. 180 days. That's not nearly enough. You need at least a couple years to create something else. The also he's leaving out the fact that the NHTSA NHTSA works together with the EPA to create CAFE. So you have two government agencies working together who have stakeholders at the meetings. That it's just not achievable what he's saying. Now, and he says it includes industry consultation. CAFE has had industry consultation for going on decades. Automakers have always been in the conversation about emission standards. Current regulatory improvements assume technologies that don't even exist. That's not right. The CAFE standards they put out don't assume any new technologies. They just put out the CO2 limits of what they need for emissions, and automakers develop technologies to meet those limits. The last Biden cafe I read, and the last Trump cafe I read, and the last Obama cafe I read, it never says that. That's completely incorrect what he's saying. Those technologies do exist, and they have existed. Automakers go to the EPA and said, "Hey, we can make better emissions because we have this new technology." Who came up with turbos? Wasn't EPA. No, automakers know how to get to this point. So one national standard, no more California, other state by state waivers. Completely agree with that. I completely agree with getting rid of California standards. California has a unique use case, though. We need to figure out some way to get the standards to work for them because they have the mountains, they have the ocean, they have a lot of shipping. They have big issues in California. So we got to figure that one out. But yeah, I don't like the California mandate. Mandates stable emissions and fuel economy standards from 2027 to 2035. We're writing a 10-year regulatory roadmap for automakers. For perspective, the average time from conception to certification for a car takes 7 years. You can do 10 years. Automakers don't really care. The engines for the 2027 standards right now are being released. So they're already shipping those engines. They already made all the changes. And the 2027 standards, like we talked about earlier, really only have to deal with catalytic converters and increasing that and the increase in gasoline or particulate filters, which already happened to be on the Maverick, and the Tundra's got the option for it. And there's actually one more thing that people are missing, which I just read about the other day. I want to share with you guys in a minute. Ensure standards are based on real world feasibility and affordability. Sure. Not government mandates disconnected from the consumer demand. The biggest thing with affordability that he doesn't talk about is safety equipment. Mandatory safety equipment has seen a big rise in total vehicle price. So you can reduce the emissions equipment on these things, but that's not the big savings. The big savings would be reducing backup cameras, reducing airbags, reducing seatbelts, and reducing all that kind of stuff would make a bigger impact. Requires input from manufacturers, already happens. Energy producers, already happens. And consumers, already happens. Instead of bureaucrats pushing a political agenda, this already happens. I swear to God, people don't understand how cafe gets together. Remember we talked about 2009, 380,000 comments. Cafe, when they go to pass that, it takes multiple years because they have stakeholder meetings, they have conversations with industry, they have conversations with oil companies, they have conversations with everybody. They bring all stakeholders together. That's what happens. So this line here is ridiculous. And then he's pumping out how good the Transportation Freedom Act is, and that's fine. I just there's so many flawed thinking here that I was surprised people brought it up. People want to know what the chances of it passing. It hasn't even gone to the floor, hasn't even gone to committee yet. And the committee's gonna look at this and they're gonna take out, well, this gone away. California would pull this thing back, that gone away. You're gonna start line iteming and stuff that doesn't make any sense. And you're gonna be left with a bill that doesn't really do anything. Now, I want to point out one more thing that I thought was interesting. So the 2027 EPA's new rule mandates, one of the things they want to change was it would address liability. This is funny because a lot of people, funny to me, because a lot of people are like, okay, one more thing I want to address that came up in the comments is that the EPA's 27. Okay, finally, one more thing I want to talk about. The big issue that as I can see it from where I stand and watch your comments and watch the video stuff, the big issue where I understand it is not so much the emissions equipment itself. Hold on before you comment. It is the reliability of said equipment. So if your DPF filter didn't break down, if your SCR system didn't break, if you didn't have any issues with the truck and it ran just fine all the time, and it was the same reliability as we had back in 2000s of diesels, I don't think people would care as much. DEF, yes, DEF fluid, you got to buy it, and I appreciate people don't love it. I had a diesel for a year and I just bought it. I understand though the people hate it. I get it. But if the emissions equipment was as reliable as it was back then, and then you get better horsepower, you get better torque, you get better towing, you get better overall vehicle. If you look at an older, like my father-in-law's got 2006 GMC Sierra versus a new 2025 GMC Sierra 2500, it's incredible how much more the new truck is just smoother riding, better towing, better torque, huge improvements. So if we could go back and have the reliability, we wouldn't have the issues going forward. That's my thesis. Again, comment below, tell me I'm a rhino, an idiot, dumb, all that kind of stuff. But I think if they were reliable, people wouldn't be as concerned, which I find kind of ironic because the EPA wants to attack the 2027 standards, which included an increase in automakers' warranty for said emission systems. So the EPA's new rule mandates emission systems warranties increase from 100,000 miles to upwards of 450,000 miles, and defined useful life of regulated vehicles increases from 435,000 miles to 650,000 miles. So the EPA's new rule wanted to address reliability to make your heavy duty truck not have as many problems. And they wanted to force automakers to really work on reliability of the diesel exhaust systems, which I'm sure, and when I did the walk around the new 6.7 liter Cummins, that was a topic. It was a topic of how to make these systems, the emission systems, more reliable. So that was already happening. And now we have Zeldin going in and saying, we're going to cut all that out and not worry about that. And so your warranty on your emission systems will probably revert back 100,000 miles, which means we'll still have the same reliability issues that were currently plaguing heavy duty diesels. Now, that just makes no sense to me. When we want to move forward with holding automakers more accountable for making emission systems last longer and save you money and downtime with your trucks and getting repairs and having all the expenses involved in emissions equipment, I think we would. All right, there's my responses to a lot of your questions. Again, I've been typing up a bit, and I'm just like, you know what? A video makes more sense. I can explain more details and what's going on. So if you're shopping for a new diesel truck, well, as my cousin asked me the other day about what's going in the marketplace, it's confusion. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. I'm going to report on the best I can, give you the information that I'm seeing out there today, and hopefully you find it useful or you don't. That's what happens. Yeah. For more, check out the forum at forum.pickuptrucktalk.com. Conversation going on over there and the website. And check out the videos up over here. As always, thanks for watching. I will see you down the road.